Hello, hello. I just did a whole video and forgot to hit record. Oh man. Hopefully I can recapture some of that fire. I wanted to come to and give a quick take on the whole MAGA Civil War. Um, I feel I kind of come at it from a certain lens and standpoint that I haven't quite heard some others. So for those who don't know, Elon and Vivek, they tweeted some shit, really got folks riled up. Um, I'm more so gonna focus on Vivek's comments. Elon's, I expect that from Elon, and Elon's just as equally full of shit, if not more. And yeah, you know, but the things I talk about could also apply to Elon's comments. I find Vivek's more interesting because it's an Indian guy talking to white folks like they black folks. And it's like, wow, what a time to be alive. I did not see this shit coming for 2025 on my bingo card. Um, but I'll just read a couple little snippets from his tweet. The reason top tech companies often hire firstborn and first generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, in quotations, a lazy and wrong explanation, in quotation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers. And if we are really serious about fixing a problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World over Zach and Slater, over, or Zach and Slater over Screech in Saved by the Bell, or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters, would not produce the best engineers. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptically at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view those kind of kids with scorn. If you grew up aspiring to normacy, normacy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s or even now who raised their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normacy doesn't cut it in hyper competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we'll have our asses handed to us by China. And he says some other shit, but that's pretty much the crux of it. Um, I would say his comments are like mostly bullshit. Most people are going to be, I guess you could say, quote unquote, average. That's how numbers work, and it pretends that if everybody does these things, that they will get these outcomes, which is not the case. And I do agree, it does take work. You do have to put in work. You don't just get out in a vacuum. Um, I do think that there is somewhat of a cultural aversion to conflict that's been growing in America. Um, I feel like you kind of see it in sports, and I see that those mentalities translating over to other places, like in the workplace, for instance. And to kind of illustrate what I mean is, um, back in the day coming up, you would have athletes and there would be rivalries where, oh, this guy don't like this guy. And it didn't sometimes they had a reason. Sometimes it just kind of seemed like, oh damn, man, you showed up and you breathing? Man, fuck you. Got the nerve to be alive. How dare you? Like a good example of this is Michael Jordan. I remember, I think it was the Last Dance documentary where he's talking about going up against Clyde Drexler. And he's like, Clyde showed up at the gym to actually play the game? Oh man, fuck that. I took that personally. And now you saw a shift over the years to where like, oh well, everybody should get a trophy because you got the MVP, you got the champion, and maybe like most improved or a couple other accolades, but everybody should get a trophy because everybody's a winner. And even though they lost, they still need to feel like they're a winner and all the typical jazz. And I feel it's kind of watered down and in some aspects, I guess you could say, kind of a feminized competition or the aspect of competition of going head to head. Like some of that still exists, don't get me wrong. But it's far more prevalent and pronounced now than at least any time when I've been alive. I've seen more guys competing and trying to be friends on the court. And not to say that nobody was ever friends back in the 90s or early 2000s. It's just once the whistle blows, like I'm trying to bust your ass, bro. After the whistle blows, we can go back to Kiki and the ha ha, but I'm gonna hand your ass to you right? In between these lines. And I don't feel that's as prevalent today. And like I said, I've seen in work settings, especially with younger individuals, where there's an aversion to conflict. And it's like, oh, you talk, present your ideas. If somebody feels strongly one way and you feel strongly another, that's okay. Speak respectfully, but pronounce your ideas. I can't tell you how many times, especially working with younger employees, where somebody's come to me and they're like, "Well, they see it this way, blah blah blah, this particular thing, and I see it this way, and I don't know how to present that to them. Can you present that to them?" And it's like, yeah, and I do the same thing every time. I grab them, I grab the person, and I get them in a room, I lay it out, and you see this face of horror kind of coming up, like, "Oh my God, why did he pull me in here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, everybody's grown here. They feel something should be done this way. You feel it should be done another way. Yeah, figure it out. Let me know how it turns out." And it's something that I've really thought was kind of just like, well, it's just the crop of people that we pick. They're more conflict averse and whatnot. At the place I work, and then speaking to other peers and management at other companies, they're like, nah, we run into similar things where there's conflicts and guidance, or the team leads and or the peer worker peers have you know differing ideas on how to handle certain things, and or there's certain conflicts that really are just a conversation you can clearly see as a misunderstanding or whatnot. And a lot of people are scared to engage. Um, I don't think that's the only thing. I would say the biggest flaw of American culture is that we accept far too much bullshit. But I'll speak on that a little bit later. The second part is there's no real skills gap in America, and everything I've seen really leads me to believe that, yeah, you might have some minuscule shortages in an industry or two, but there is an abundance of Americans, generally speaking, to do most any job that you want here in America. It really just boils down to two things. Are the working conditions fair? It is the pay fair. I mean, that's more or less it. Like my mother was a nuclear scientist. She worked for a place called Savannah Riverside, and she started out there in like the early 80s. And what she did for a living was she manufactured the components for nuclear bombs until the Cold War ended and things kind of shifted over. But she couldn't, because of the nature of her work, she couldn't say a whole lot about what she did. But she was like, "Hey, look, we do essentially build the components to the warheads. We build basically building bombs out there." Uh, and she didn't have like some science degree in nuclear physics or some shit like that. Like she was a high school graduate. She went to I believe she told me she went to a program that helped her uh, get the job through a technical school. And that was it. That was it. And most Americans, I really, I really truly believe have the capabilities and capacities to, if not do a job already, to quickly learn a job and become productive in it. Every I'm every job, more or less, has a particular learning curve. And I struggle to with the notion that Americans are in essence, this is kind of what Elon said, in essence too dumb to do a lot of these jobs, so we have to bring in these immigrants. That's not what it is. Truly what it is, this is late stage capitalism at play. This is a power and control play, because what's not really being talked about, at least in mainstream news so much, is that um, these H-1B visas were essentially started as a guest worker program, for those that were kind of, I guess you say, like managerial tech. There's different ones, like you got H1, H2, H3, and they're more so focused on different sectors or industries. Um, but the whole premise of this is we can't find a lot of people here to do the job. So I need to look abroad to get somebody who can do the job and bring them in. So the whole premise and the way that these things are written is that you're not supposed to pass over domestic Americans that are qualified and capable of doing the job. However, that's exactly what these corporations and what are doing. They prefer H-1B visas, H-1B visa workers, because it gives them a great degree of power, because they can pay those people essentially whatever they want. They can put them in whatever type of working conditions they want. Those people don't have rights. They cannot push back against the corporation the way an American could. Because if they did, an employer could just simply terminate them, and then it's back to their home country. And most of them, they don't want that, because even coming over here and getting screwed is a better deal for them than what they could get at home in most cases. And they want this indentured servitude. And that's something that we really need to talk about. In my honest opinion, I feel we we need to talk about severely restricting or even doing away with some of these programs because of the fact that it just doesn't make sense. You have companies like Tesla who laid off thousands of American workers to flood them with H-1Bs. And one of the things I've often noticed, I believe the H-1B visa requirement is like there's certain requirements, but one of them is in terms of wages, the position has to be 60K or higher. So you can generally tell it when you see these companies with these crazy ranges. You might see a position that's like the range is 70 to 150K, or starts at 80 but goes up to 210. And it's like, what? And there's not like a sales component to it. It's not like a crazy bonus, I think I've worked in tech and SaaS, software as a service companies for HCM. And I've seen typically bonuses like 15 to 20% of salary, some type of annual basis. So, you know, a good paying job is probably like, it's not uncommon to say a job like 120 or so, especially for like a product manager. Even like service managers will be topping out at like 100K, or not topping out, but be around 100K or so. And you're talking about a 20% bonus. Okay, that's a gross 120. That's not factoring in like equity or any other parts of your compensation package. And what I've seen happen a lot of times is in companies that have those big ranges, essentially those visa workers are seen to be being brought in at that lower wage, at the bottom of that range. And Native Americans are being paid at the more so like the median of the range. So like that position, that 70 to 150K, yeah, they're bringing in visa workers at around that 70K, and Americans, or native born Americans, are being paid close to about like 115 to 125 within that range. And it can get even starker. And another thing I've also seen has been where some companies are just frankly blatant, where they're asking way too much for a single position. An example of one is I recently interviewed for a well-known health insurance company. Um, you can kind of say they're like the Corvette of health insurance, and the role was essentially like three jobs in one. They were talking about ability to do market analytics and research and whatnot, which is what my undergrad degree was in. They were talking about product development and product management, well, which I have some experience with that. And then also basically like product support. And it's like, damn, that is a lot to ask of one person. And then you have a salary range that was stupid crazy. It's like 80K to 210. Like, what the hell? It's like, what's your salary expectation? Like, I don't even really know a number to throw out there. Like, I I do. No, it wasn't that one. I was 80 to 210. That one, the range was crazy because it was 1 to 110, 1 to 110K. But once again, each of those jobs are 100K jobs because it was this long list of responsibilities and everything. And I was like, okay, I kind of got the impression that you would be working with some of these entities. Like you want me to actually do the market research. You want me to actually spearhead and lead product support. in product management. Like that's a lot. And I don't think a lot of American workers would take that role, but a H-1B worker definitely would. Um, that salary and that money means something different for them than it does for us. And it's because of that that they're able to be exploited in that way. And the biggest reason that companies want these workers is that they drive wages down. Because if, for instance, with this rollout I was just describing, like it was with BCBS, and if they get a significant number of workers to accept those types of roles, that becomes the new paradigm. That becomes to borrow a gaming term, that's the new meta. To where now it it's not just one subset of these roles being paid equitably, but rather if you want this type of pay, like you gotta do what used to be the work of 2 to 3 people. So I, the only real cultural, I should say the biggest cultural flaw I can say for Americans is I feel that we as Americans accept far too much. Um, the fact that our government behaves and conducts itself the way that it does, that essentially there is no refuge on any particular issue for Americans, should be troubling. Uh, in essence, a lot of people voted with immigration in mind this past election cycle. And there was a feeling that, you know what, the Biden administration, they flooded the country with all these people coming across the borders and whatnot. And if Killer Kamala got in, she would she would do the same. And Trump was railing against that. But meanwhile, it's like, if you thinking about it, it's like, yeah, he's kind of talked a lot about exploiting workers. Yeah, he don't really got no problem with foreign folks working for him. And it's kind of like, I believe if you really sat them down, you will find like they're just two sides of the same coin. It's like, you know what? I don't like those people that come across the border, but the people that come in on these visa programs and work for the real cheap and whatnot, like, yeah, I like them. And the other side would be basically saying the opposite. In my opinion, I feel we need to have some serious discussions about restrictions on these types of programs, or maybe even elimination. Because the fact of the matter is, if there's truly a deficit, and we're just attempting to brain drain everybody else to make up for these deficits, you know what? We need to feel that pain. What makes you address a household deficit is feeling the pain of that hole. So if we truly don't have the people that can do certain things, yeah, we should feel it. And if we did feel it, we would act in a way to close that hole. But in reality, there really isn't much of a hole in a lot of places, in a lot of industries. I I've said it before. There are a lot of skilled Americans, credentialed, degreed, that are looking for work. There are millions upon millions of young prime age men and women who are chronically unemployed or severely underemployed, myself included, who are fully capable of doing a lot of the same types of roles that Vivek and that Afrikaner were just shitting on people for. And Mm, I have a, you know what? Not the screen. I'm not gonna get into Elon today. 'Cause I didn't want to be before you long, and I'm not gonna turn into Z and close 15 times. So I'm just gonna leave you with this thought. You know, I can't remember the historian that wrote about the fall of Rome, and that uh, essentially, it's kind of paraphrasing it. He wrote that Rome had become such an oppressive construct to its people that its people did not miss it. We look back with modern eyes, historians look back with modern eyes to the fall of Rome as if this great thing had faded away, but it had long since fallen from glory. And it had become a thing that oppressed the very people who it was stewarding over. How is that any different from what happened in the Austrian Empire? How's it any different than the Brits in the 1920s and what they were going through up until the decolonization period? How's that any different than what we're going through now? But that's a probably a thought for another day. But I hope you all have a great one. Peace. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Y'all take care.